Well, hello everybody, and welcome to TFT Tinfoil Talk. And today we are broaching the most controversial subject of eugenics. And I think hopefully by the end you will find that it's not very controversial at all. And where a lot of people try to put a stain on it and say, "Ooh, it's a horrible thing," and it's a thing of the past. I think we might find out that it's still with us. Nevertheless, happy to have you guys here. Do us a favor and check out all those links down below as usual, and be part of all the things we're doing. We appreciate you guys very much. Also, definitely go over and hit that share button because it's better to have a lot more people in here. We enjoy that, and it's Jennifer's up in here, and she says, "What's with the hoe claim?" I don't know. Let me see. Did Booster say something bad? He usually does.
Toho claim. Oh right. So our last our last comics news no fanspeak
Uh,
was taken by Toho because we showed that Dragon Quest trailer.
did they?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't
So
even
they
notice it. Are
claimed
you
our fan.
sure?
Yeah, I'm positively positive even.
Yay! I got copyrighted again. Oh well.
Mm-hmm,
But so so Toho's being a hoe, huh? All right, I got it.
mm-hmm.
I got it. And I even put a watermark up on that, and we talked over that the entire time. Oh well.
And
It
they
is what
still
it
got
is.
it.
And they
Hoes
still
are
got it.
mad.
Yeah, they are. Roger Heller's in here. Always happy to have you. Of course, hello, Jennifer. We have Mecca Studios. Very nice. He says, "What's good? What's good, people?" Well, we're about to talk about eugenics, so we're talking about good people. Eric says, "What is Booster going to contribute to this?"
I'm going to serve as an example for the benefit of eugenics.
That's right. That's exactly what he's doing. Yeah. Ara is in here. He says hi. Lady Celtic Moon, Heidi. Rodwell Stevens as well. Hello. Well, nice to see all you guys. We do appreciate you. And let me come over here and say hello to the guest before we dive into this. So, of course, as usual, I always have to announce the amazing oily one. How you doing there, Booster?
Oh, I'm just swell. I'm very happy. I'm very excited for our very last show
Hmm. No, it won't
because
be
this
that
is
bad at
about
all.
to get dark.
Not really. That's the thing. I think most people are afraid of talking about eugenics, but once you just lay it out in what it is, it's not that bad at all. I think it's been used improperly, but we'll get into that in a minute. But first, we want
Woo,
to say hello. But
oh
happy to have you
Lord!
here. Of course, we
Oh, I
also
got debates.
what?
I just like saying that.
All right,
I don't even
whatever.
know what it means.
But of course, guys, as you see, we also have Todd Mulrooney in here, the creator of Ignition, also the IndieCom TV guy, as well as the new Thor guy. Dude, you're just a busy bastard. How's it going?
It's going okay. I'm doing pretty good.
That's very, very, very underwhelming. Thank you. Thank you. Uh,
I
so,
feel bad. Drove George away. I feel bad.
yeah, you did.
Feel awful. Yeah.
You're a horrible
Hey, I'm
human.
over it.
Yeah. And then now you're over it. All right, cool. That was quick. All right. But thank you for being here, Todd. We also have Model 3, of course, and Model 3 is always cool to have him on TFT. How you doing, dude?
Oh man, Chester, I'm doing so good.
Yeah, are you ready to take a bite out of this topic today?
I am. I'm interested to see how it goes. I'm actually interested in the audience interaction with this too.
Yeah, no, I will be
Yeah.
doing my best to pay
Yeah,
attention.
yeah. 5 white dudes talking about the benefits of eugenics. What could possibly go
Come
wrong?
on, you're a Maori. We all know it.
Oh yeah, yeah. For today, I'm going to be Maori. Yeah,
You gotta be
yeah.
Maori.
But despite the fact that I'm probably the whitest guy here, English, Swedish heritage. Come on.
That's true. That's true.
By the
But
end of this, I'm going to be Islamic though. But yeah,
you will
we'll
be.
take
He
that.
will be Islamic.
Yeah,
That's true. That's fair. Now, Booster, do me a favor and keep a close eye on that chat. And I will be trying to
of
jump
course.
over,
Yeah,
but you keep an eye on it, okay?
I
And of
will.
course, our last member of the panel today, and I do believe will be taking somewhat of the lead today. We have Mr. Thundero himself.
Hello, everyone. Like I warned everybody last night, uh, don't be afraid to see Cal at the end of this.
Yeah,
We're gonna do it. We're going
Oh
in.
no.
we're going in. Oh wow. Well, anyway, guys.
Oh.
We're going to jump right into it today. I think there's a lot to talk about with this, and I have a feeling we're going to go in tangents. And I'm really, for me, it's going to be more interesting to see where we end up today, not so much where we start. because I think we're going to be heading in very odd directions. But nevertheless, let's just go ahead and jump right into it. Now, as you know, I always do a little primer before we jump into the open conversation. So let me get that done. And, I'll just let it see these guys can see it. I'm going to go right into it here. All right, there we go. Now, eugenics. Very interesting little word unto itself. Eu meaning well and genetics meaning born, so it's well born. Interesting created word by a man by the name of Francis Galton. Now, Francis Galton is a very interesting fellow. He is the cousin of Charles Darwin. And one of the ideas he's had is that intelligence runs in the family, and well, it seems quite obvious. But this guy is actually famous for other things too, beyond just eugenics. The only thing people seem to want to do is villainize the man for his ideas of eugenics and his potential racism, I guess. But he's created many, many things from the oddities of the perfect tea to weather maps and also fingerprinting. Yes, you have this man to thank for that. For all you criminals out there, blame him. Nevertheless, Mr. Galton had basically, I think he was trying to compete with his cousin, Charles Darwin, who, of course, at this time was a superstar, and he wanted to be a superstar as well, I think. So there's a little bit of that behind it, I believe. But in his ideas, he was doing a lot of testing and stuff, taking off what his cousin had done, actually. And he came and he traveled quite a bit too. And he came to the understanding that humans are physically and mentally diverse. And he was trying to count how many races they were, and then it went into maybe we should think about how we can make a better human. Now, you see, there's a little explanation of what eugenics is from him sitting right here. Eugenics is the study of all of the agencies under social control, which may improve or impair the inborn qualities of future generations of man, either physically or mentally. But actually, the easiest way to explain eugenics is simply this: the survival of the fittest, right? Now, right here, you see a quote from cousin Darwin, cousin Charles, and it's often quoted, and it's one of those things that frustrates me because it's taken out of context. Right? You've seen this used for many things, eugenics as well as other racial conversations. It is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. Now, they've taken this out to mean that that's what he thinks is the basis of natural selection. It's not, actually. And if you continue reading, what he says is he's talking about those that survive, meaning live long lives. He's not talking about those who breed. Because when he talks about the animals that breed, it is the strongest. It is the survival of the fittest. And of course, we all know this is true. And eugenics really comes down to that. Because we humans, we took ourselves out of that food chain a long, long time ago. And ever since then, we've been doing everything we can to make our lives easier and more comfortable. Right, and good on us for doing that. But in doing that, it also allows less desirable traits to creep in to our genetic pool across the planet. Let me give you a perfect example: eyeglasses, right? There's a huge percentage of humans that wear glasses these days, where this didn't used to be true because, you're dead if you can't see the lion coming, right? But there are many other traits that are far worse than this, of course, that have leaked in because we've made life so easy, and we've even got to the point where we support the weak, we care for. I mean, think about all the people with mental handicaps, for instance, or physical handicaps, paraplegics, quadriplegics, Down syndrome people, et cetera. And not only do we protect them, but they're in an environment where they can actually thrive, right? Now, most people would say that that's a good thing, and I think in a way it is. But there's also a negative to it, whether you like that or not, because it simply is an allowing of the weak to survive and therefore possibly procreate. And there is the rub: procreate. And that's where this all kind of went, and that's how it got ugly. And we're going to get into that. It comes down to who was allowed to breed. right? If it's just allowed to be naturalized, or if you're trying to promote the population to, hey, why don't you pick a better lover and make better babies, which they actually did, by the way, in early. I'm going to get to that in a minute, but early on. But when you get to the point that you're saying, no, we've decided that you can't procreate, and we're going to sterilize you and keep you from doing that, this is where we get into a difficult conversation, right? But it's interesting how Darwin comes back up in this, being so directly connected. But I mean, the ultimate goal, of course, is to, with this idea of Mr. Galton here, and look at that beautiful, handsome man. Look at him. It's just a peerage
I'd smooch his little cheeks.
of
Yeah.
intelligence. Yeah, right. And Booster likes him.
Yeah.
But this dude right here, his ultimate goal was to have the perfect, dichotomy of body, right? And here we have the perfect male, and of course the perfect female. Good on you, Croatia. Croatia, you're a badass. We love
Nice.
you. We respect you.
Yes.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that is how you would
I'll
elect
say
a
it again.
president.
Every
Where'd
woman
you get a
was
photo
built
of
like
me,
that.
Chester? What's that?
If every woman was built like that, there would be no war.
There would be no war. We'd be
no
busy
reason.
climbing on top of that.
Done. Mm-hmm.
Mount Everest, indeed. But that is but this is the goal, right? Whereas we don't want that. No, definitely don't want that.
Oh,
And we certainly don't want this. Oh my God.
oh, that's very unfortunate.
Oh, that's
Holy.
everything about that is
Even
unnatural. In fact,
when Caitlyn was Bruce, physically maybe good athlete, but appearance-wise wasn't the best. At least not in the later years.
I put him up there as the female example because it's ironic, because actually he is a survival of fittest type guy. He's a physical phenom, right? But anyway, and moving on, my little bit of humor there. But this guy comes up in the conversation quite a bit, and here's the thing. And we're going to get into it. I'm not going to take away anybody's thunder. I'm just doing a primer here. But this dude right here gets blamed for eugenics and all the world's ills, it seems. It's amazing to me, as every year goes by, more and more claims of evil get put on top of this fella. Now, he did
what
some...
did poor Hitler do wrong?
Well, dude, he did some pretty bad things, but he didn't do all that.
We all do.
He's like a scapegoat in many ways, and I'm not taking away from the things he did. It was war, right? But he's become a scapegoat without question. And whatever, fine. Well, let it go. I don't know why we don't scapegoat Stalin or Mao more, because those guys were actually much worse. But whatever. This dude is at the center of the conversation, no matter what you talk about. So I wanted to show a nice,
Brett says this is not the best picture of Charlie Chaplin.
Right. But here's where I'm going to end my primer and bring it back over and start getting into the conversation, though. In actuality, I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm going to inform you. Little old Hitler here, he didn't create eugenics. He didn't take eugenics from Francis Galton, the British man. What he did is he took it from the Americans. Yeah, and he was actually in very close communication with many American scientists and universities on the subject, because the actual modern eugenics didn't happen in Britain. It happened in America. And it was a very popular thing, by the way. A lot of Americans, and this is what I got into my point earlier, was that there was kind of this push in America to, make better babies. And there were a lot of people who were really getting into it. It wasn't nothing about keeping this person from being born or killing that inappropriate thing. It was about yourself using eugenics to improve your family's genetic history. Right. And it was very popular in America. It was founded and pushed in America mainly. And it was something that Hitler got very interested in. As a matter of fact, so interested was he in it that he actually added it into his Mein Kampf. Right. But keep that in mind. Eugenics, as it is, even though created by a British man, is actually an American thing. All right. Well, now.
Kind of like the internet.
Kind of like the
Or the World Wide Web, I should say.
This is true. Well, anyway, there's my little primer. Now, of course, I have a page up so I can go and do typing for anything these guys might want. And, of course, they might have their own things to share. But that's my introduction to eugenics.
Comments.
And comments. So go ahead.
All right. So Tolfa says, did Chester just renounce Booster? That's is that true? Did you just do this just now?
Maybe.
SJW says, I see the channel is embracing the fact they are literal Nazis. James F.
That didn't take long.
Beveridge says, eugenics is not survival of the fittest. That's wrong. Eugenics is the manipulation of human genetics to alter specific
No.
traits.
It's not genetics.
No, it's
It's
not
not
genetics.
any genetic.
We're going to get into that conversation, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's quite a few comments that are saying that we're mixing it up with natural selection.
No, we're not.
That's,
Not at all.
different
You didn't listen to what I
Yep.
said, so let me reiterate. What I said is eugenics is let me make it simpler. Eugenics is a direct attempt to try to bring back survival of the fittest because we have removed ourselves from the food chain. We've removed ourselves from the need for it. I just kind of went long-winded, I guess. But I'm not saying that eugenics is the survival of the fittest. I'm saying that it is an attempt to go back to the survival of the fittest.
Well,
So,
when I do my part too, I'll also explain that it's more than just the science. The science that the name that is chosen for it and the science that it is actually two different things. And I'll get into it more later, but that'll help explain what you're talking about. But keep going.
And it would be correct to say that genetic manipulation would be a form of eugenics, but it is not the only form. And Eric Hawkins had an interesting comment there about slavery considered eugenics, and it absolutely is a form of eugenics where the strongest males and females were partnered and paired and coupled to breed and to increase the strength of the stock.
We do it all the time. What do you think a GMO is?
Sure.
Yes.
I mean, right? I mean, but genetics is going to come up, and the hubris of modern scientists will certainly play a part in the hubris of old scientists. But we'll get into that. Go ahead, Booster.
No? Oh, shit, what was I going ahead with?
You were reading chat.
I was. Yes. All right. Eric Hawkins asked, would slavery be considered eugenics?
We answered that.
Okay. Ray Fulo, Himmler was a primary driving force in the Third Reich. In a regime top-heavy with nut jobs, Himmler made the others look downright sane. All right. James F. Beveridge once again says, it's breeding superior humans. Nice. Eric N. Boyce says, Booster likes to manipulate genes. Yes, I do. Joe Marone says, an improved breed of human. That's what the eugenics war was all about. Captain Kirk, Space Seed.
Okay. Well, we'll let it go ahead.
Eric Hawkins follows up with that, saying that slaves were bred to be the strongest. Okay. Well, there you go.
Okay, cool.
That's a lot of comments.
No, keep an eye on it. Keep interrupting us with that, please. I want to hear from the chat today, particularly. So thank you.
I'll try, but it's going pretty fast there. I can't keep up with all the juicy ones.
Jesus, man, it's like what, 30 people in there maximum?
Yeah.
Come on.
Hey, how about you piss off, Dicko?
All right. All right, so we've got our primer. We've dealt with the chat for now. So who wants to kick this off? Who wants to go first?
I will, if nobody else wants to go first.
Go ahead.
All right. So Chester gave you a very brief history of the science by the name eugenics. The eugenics is also, as we were talking about, selective breeding. It's been going on for thousands of years in humanity. You could even make a case it's been going on before we were even human, and that is what made us human. But that's neither here nor there. What I want to talk about right now is what is actually eugenics. Let's break it down even further. Eugenics, according to its basic Google definition, is the science of improving human population by controlled breeding to increase the occurrence of desirable heritable characteristics. And it was developed largely by who you said, and it fell out of favor with the Nazis, everything you said.
Yeah.
However, what does that actually mean? What is a science in this case? Well, the basic meaning of a science, according to Google, the intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structural and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. What eugenics actually is, what it fundamentally becomes functionally, is a measure of humanity's ability to evolve. That being said, that does not mean it is good or bad. It's just like chemistry. Chemistry is the ability to observe and measure chemical reactions of all different stripes, correct? Astronomy is the observation and measurement of space and the stars and da 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 da. All eugenics is, and what it's been demonized as some evil thing that Hitler did, so it's bad. All it is our ability to track human development through the ages. That being said, it is a measurement of a force. You could call it evolution, you could call it mutation. It doesn't really matter because both of those are kind of the same thing. There is another side of eugenics, and this is the other part of this, what I was talking about earlier, that is called dysgenics. Now, what dysgenics is quite literally the opposite of eugenics. Eugenics is evolution generally considered beneficial or makes that entity, usually human beings, stronger. Dysgenics would be the opposite. So things like Down syndrome, for instance, is a dysgenic force in our genome. It creates dysgenics. If we continue to have, many people with it, it eventually will affect the entire human populace. Inbreeding is a dysgenic force or dysgenic action
Booster
in humanity. It's something we want to limit. Now, why is this so important? Why is this one thing that's very controversial? Because most people don't even know about what eugenics is. They just think it's, well, Hitler did it, so bad. Mm-hmm. They also don't know, very few people, even the people who know about eugenics, even understand that eugenics is just a term that was created to help them measure the positive evolution of humanity. That's all it is. Dysgenics is the opposite of that. So your order and your chaos, if you want to be poetic about it.
Yeah.
People really don't know about dysgenics, and the reason they don't, and this is where the TFT part comes in for me, is by design. The people who are in the elite, if you will, the people who control the world and right now effectively control human evolution, don't want you to know that there is a negative side effect to your decisions as a person long term besides what affects you and maybe even just the people around you. Mm-hmm. What we should be doing as a species, and some countries are doing this. China's doing it to some degree. Japan's done it since forever. Hungary's doing it, and even places like Iceland is doing it, but they're doing it in a way that I think is wrong. Is encourage the disillusion, if you will, to dissolve those bad dysgenic forces that are naturally within us, but also around us. There are things that make people worse. We all know this. Drugs make people worse. Too much of anything really can make you worse as a person, can bring you down, either make you fat, make you unhealthy in some other way, give you diabetes, all sorts of different things. Too much sex, you have a chance to get a venereal disease. All of these things are not good for human evolution. So the reason why this is so controversial and the reason why it's not talked about very much in the public in modern science, scientists talk about it all the time, but they don't talk about it in public very much, is because the powers that be want this stifled. They do not want people to understand that they've been lied to and told that it doesn't matter what they do. Free love, all the stuff that came out of the 60s and from on, we live in a completely dysgenic, at least in America, completely dysgenic society. We don't have a social pressure on most, especially young women, to take care of themselves when it comes to sexually, when it comes to reproduction, when it comes to all of these things. And we definitely don't have it on young men. There's almost no consequence except for a baby for a young man to just be a slut.
Yeah. May I interject real quick? The thing to keep in mind to kind of put credence on what Thundera was saying, Francis Galton, who is equally demonized in this conversation as Adolf Hitler is, he actually was the type of guy, one of his quotes is, count everything all the time. He was what his main goal was to measure things.
Yes.
It wasn't to make decisions. Right?
Correct.
It was the Americans that took it and started to try to make decisions, right? But it was built upon exactly what Thundera was saying. It was built upon measuring, because eugenics and dysgenics, they don't need a label. They just have been taking place forever. This guy just simply wanted to find a way to measure it. He wanted to count how many races and how you break that down. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, and Chester's exactly right. These are natural forces. The science of eugenics just labels them and measures them. That's all really science does at the end of the day. It finds something that's happening anyway, and it explains it to you. That's the point of it. through measurements, mathematics, things of that nature. So we have in us, in pretty much every religion, every spiritual person, all the great philosophers have said very much the same thing. We have, two forces within us, yin yang, whatever you want to call it, good, bad. However, and here's where I'm going to come back around on it now. However, as Kat was talking about, isn't abortion a form of eugenics? Isn't that what it was sold as originally? The reason why they would do it would be to make a better human. There are, just as when it comes to too much order is a bad thing. You don't want too much order because it stifles creativity, stifles freedom. You don't want too much chaos because obviously you don't want too much chaos. When you get to the point where you start killing people to make a better human, that's when you've crossed the line.
Yeah.
That's when it becomes less about, just making good choices and more about having others make choices for you. That's where Hitler and the Chinese and many places have gone wrong with it and taken it to the absolute extreme where they completely devalue humanity. When in reality, the purpose of eugenics is to measure the actual value of humanity. What is great about humans? This is something that has been going on in Europe especially forever. When you talk about things like the noble houses, nobles, nobility itself, royalty, all of that is effectively a form of measuring what they thought was better blood, right? Good blood. You had noble blood. When we talk about that, we're just talking about eugenics. I mean, let's be honest. That's what we're talking about. They didn't know that. They didn't have a term for it or the science to create an actual science around it, but they understood it through observation. That if, this really strong man and this really strong woman, they're real healthy and virile, and they have children, more often than not, the children are also going to be healthy and virile. And if we keep doing that, we're going to have a lot of healthy and virile people around. Plus, back in the day, they hadn't conquered the elements like we pretty much have in modern society. So when it got really cold, lots and lots and lots and lots of people died. Every year, every time. And there was nothing they could really do about it if they couldn't keep themselves warm and fed.
Yeah.
So the winners in other things, other forces, were a eugenic force. See, people take eugenics, and this was my whole point, and think it's something that mankind has to force. We don't.
No.
As Chester said, it happens whether we want it to or not. So we need to be out in front of it. In my humble opinion, humanity must be out in front of it. That doesn't mean we go and kill everybody with Down syndrome. Doesn't mean we go and kill anybody with a birth defect of any kind. But we need to at least be able to have an honest conversation about eugenic forces and dysgenic forces. And the fact that we can't have that conversation leads me to believe that somebody doesn't want us to have that conversation, and there's a reason for it.
Yes, her name was Margaret Sanger.
Yes.
But very good points, dude. And do keep in mind that at the beginning of the 20th century, any modern country on the planet was doing, every modern country on the planet was doing eugenics in one way or another. It wasn't just Germany. It was everybody was doing it. And this, where the first sterilization started? Anybody? Anybody? No?
I don't know.
America.
Yep.
We're leading the world, Chester.
We were leading the world.
Shall I read your
Unfortunately,
comment?
it was one of the reasons we did lead the world because it was working. There's a reason why when we were bringing in sometimes not the best people, usually really good people, but sometimes not the best people from all corners of the world just looking to get away from whatever it was in the old world that was messing with them or their problems. Somehow we still found a way to turn it around and build for a century the greatest population of people on the planet in every metric. They were stronger, faster. We would dominate the Olympics. There's a reason for that, and it was because of eugenics. That's why it was happening. It's the little boogeyman in our past we don't talk about. There's a reason why African Americans, which I hate that term, Black Americans, on pretty much every metric are superior. I hate that word too, but it's the best word, to Africans who are of the same race and largely the same genetic code, but because of slavery and other things, and the fact that they had to compete in an environment that didn't quite want them there, when segregation and things, they had to become smarter and stronger and faster than they were before. It was forcing an adaptation. Now, that doesn't mean that was a good thing. I'm not trying to. Please don't take what I'm saying that was a good thing, because it wasn't. It should have never been done.
Darrow loves slavery.
Eugenics was the force that allowed African Americans to be overrepresented in sports in America. Why the NFL is so full of black people on the playing field?
That's definitely
It's
eugenics.
because they are incredibly gifted.
Yeah.
Well, and at the most basic level, the trade was selecting. They weren't going over there and picking up weak specimens and putting them into the trade. They were taking the best and healthiest from Africa.
Yeah.
Correct.
No, it's true. And I don't, and it just as a side point, I don't care for that term African American either, because they're not genetically similar to Africans at all anymore.
So we're just going to say the blacks.
Well, that's why we have the word blacks, dude, because they're not African anymore. You do realize that nearly all black people in America have alternate races in them, mainly white. They're not actually black Africans anymore. They are something different. Actually,
Something better, more powerful.
In many ways,
in some ways, that's true.
But don't we all originate from Africa anyway?
No,
That's becoming seen as not true. No, yeah, I think that's
an
going to be
entirely different
old
episode
science.
of TFT. All right, so some comments. Mior says, "Hey Booster, you're going to finish your book getting it right this time."
Ooh, nice, Mior.
Joe Marone is quoting Khan. I believe they're talking about an episode Space Seed or something.
Yeah.
James F. Beveridge, is that what that is? He says, "This is all moot. CRISPR-Cas9, I had to Google that, will negate the need for eugenics, which is time-consuming as
we're going to get into that, dude. We're going to get into that. I'm waiting. I'm just waiting because I'm hoping that one of these other guys are going to bring that up, and I just kind of hold him back is what I'm doing. But
he's gonna get you as soon as you start yapping about it. Roger Heller says, "I'll listen because to me, I thought eugenics to me was a way through rejuvenate the body cells through some kind of fountain of youth. Is I don't know. Structured that strangely.
That's not it at all. Although that'd be a cool conversation too."
Nice. Comic Book Bob says Space Seed was one of my top 10 episodes, so I'm guessing eugenics was a big thing on that, huh?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah.
Maker Studio says, "So is eugenics a form of study?"
Of course. Yeah. It's a measurement. It's just like all science.
For some reason says midgets with a question mark.
Hey, we've always had them. I want to keep my midgets. I like my little people.
Joe Moran says eugenics, the study of comedic stylings of Eugene Levy.
Ooh, nice. That was a good one. I like that one.
Kat R brings up the abortion and eugenics comment, and Joe Marone responds to that, asking, "If you're thinking of Margaret Sanger, I think that was eliminating competition in the gene pool." And mentioned the Planned Parenthood ties to that.
Racism does exist, and racism with incentive tends to find a way.
The boys in here are talking something about the too much sex comments, and Mika Studio replies, "All I can say is big girls ride for free."
That's damn right. Damn right they do.
Yeah, baby. What else have we got here? We've got something about the Spartans, of course.
Yeah, that's that's a beautiful example of eugenics in operation, even though they didn't have a term for it.
Hannah Kirk says, "Honestly, I'd like the father of my future children to be healthy and maybe have a nice jawline. Then you need Henry Cavill."
Oh,
because he has jaws for days, boy.
He's turned his back on Ezra. He's not dating Ezra anymore. He's all about the Henry Cavill. Oh my God.
Oh, he should have thought about getting a better jaw.
Speaking of Henry Cavill, the Superman movie Man of Steel is one of these many propaganda films against eugenics, talking about that's what he was fighting effectively. That's what he was designed to be against and was sent off to Earth because of, was their eugenic program.
Yeah.
But if we supported eugenics, we could all look like Henry Cavill.
Oh, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one important point about eugenics, especially as far as a hierarchy in society, is what people would call the ruling class or the people that are actually in control. They're all for eugenics among themselves. They are against it for the plebes.
Oh yeah,
They
dysgenics.
they want like that's why you're seeing this really big push with the transsexual and the gay, and they really want everyone to be one kind of mocha colored, even IQ,
Yes.
docile, go
Low
home, sit in
IQ,
front of
low
the TV.
IQ,
Not low, because you have to be able to operate machinery. So
operationally low, operationally
if
low.
they can get you around 100 and stay around
I think they
100,
want
then
85, dude.
Mhm.
I hope not. Good
well,
Lord.
80,
Bit more than
80
85,
used to be
hopefully.
clinically retarded, so they don't want 80.
You
They
do
definitely
realize
want,
there are whole populations on this planet around that number, right?
well, sub-Saharan Africans are at 75. That's the about.
Uh-oh.
Mexico.
Uh-oh.
So you do want a certain amount of you want just enough IQ to be proficient at a job, but not too much to really be interested in causing any kind of a turmoil outside of go home, look at the information that's pushed to you through your cable line and the internet, and then get up and do it again. That's what they
Yeah.
want.
Yeah, no, you're 100% true on that. But it's interesting. We kind of just diverged right into IQ without even acknowledging that IQ comes directly from the eugenics study. It's one of them measures. And IQ is a very interesting thing because now we know so much more about how the brain works than we did then. IQ has become, for me, a simple a part of understanding intelligence. It's not the overall. At that time, it was. I think it still has some use, but it was a measure that came out of Mr. Galton, and of course, it is one of those things that was used by Margaret Sanger to promote what she wanted to do. And keep in mind, Margaret Sanger is Hillary Clinton's most favorite person ever. So I would love someone here to delve into who Margaret Sanger was.
Uh-oh. All right, a few more comments. We have Roger Heller saying, but wouldn't China be a good example of eugenics? Is it? Are they just a
No,
shit ton of
I think it
people?
would be a good example of dysgenics.
Joe Marone says, uh-oh, we starting to get into Stephen Molyneux territory. Not an argument.
Molyneux is one of the few, as he would call himself, I don't know if it's fitting, but he'll call himself a public intellectual. He's one of the few people who will put it out there and talk about it.
Yeah, well,
Most people in an intellectual sphere who know about these things, they just won't. They're afraid to lose their
Right.
cushy jobs or whatever.
and
Eric and Boyd says, my IQ is low. I am watching TFT as proof.
that's true. That is true. But no, I mean, we have to broach IQ because, plain and simply, it's one of the original measures of eugenics, and therefore it's part of the conversation. But like I said, there's more to intelligence than just IQ. I think also brain balance is a major aspect, and I don't know how many of you have had a brain balance test, but I think there are many factors that come into understanding the intelligence of an individual, not just the IQ. The IQ is basically looking at your intelligence quotient. I mean, how much can you keep in your head and bring back to the forefront of your thought at a quick pace. That's really what IQ is representing. It doesn't represent the creativity or even genius in a way, even though we say that anybody above 140 is considered genius, which I think is a pretty kind of low number. But nevertheless, IQ must be discussed in this conversation. You cannot
And
avoid it.
EQ is commonly being used now as a better measurement.
Yeah.
Your emotional quotient. It's more in line with your ability to handle responsibility and to make good decisions.
Well, that's a brain
Because
balance thing, right?
Yeah, but it does have. It's actually called an EQ,
Yeah.
an emotional
Yeah.
quotient. So.
Yeah, I agree.
The ancients knew what they were talking about. Every ancient culture, philosophy that matters and that stuck around talked about balance. All of them.
Yep, that's
They knew
true.
what they were talking about. They just
That's
didn't know why they were right. They just knew they were.
So no one's going to tackle Margaret Sanger. I have to do it.
Yes.
I'll let you. I'll let you.
Oh God. All right. Margaret Sanger was a lady who was part of the American eugenics movement, and like I said, eugenics was really pushed and became what it became in America is where it started. And then even though it's kind of interesting with America because the Europeans and other powers have always looked down on America. They always have, right? They still do in a way. right? And of course, before World War II, militarily, we weren't really much threat. We didn't have a very powerful army. We weren't seen as an actual military threat, but we were certainly an economic one. And but so even though they often wanted to look down on us and see us as these frontier savages and such like that, they often copied us. How ironic that things still continue that way today. And one of the things they copied that was very popular, like I said, the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, was eugenics, and that's why it became so widespread. Now, Sanger, like I said, she was part of the American overall conversation on eugenics, and she was with her own group, but there were many, many groups. Oddly enough, ironically enough, this all started in Virginia. Strangely, and of course, we all know what's going on in Virginia, so keep an eye on that and support your brothers. But beyond that, what she promoted, because this is where the ugly side of things come in, and the eugenics, using a measure of any science, can be used to for ill means, for nefarious purposes, right? It doesn't matter what the science is; it can be used poorly, right, or even evil, we could say. And Margaret Sanger fits into the category of evil for me easily. And I find it very ironic, or worrying, maybe would be a better word, that so many Democrats, including our very own little Hillary Clinton, are major, major fans and followers of Margaret Sanger. Now, Margaret Sanger, she took the idea of eugenics and she put a full on racial look at it. Right. Whereas
Mhm.
before that, it really there was some racial things because it was trying to measure and figure out how many races they were and trying to catalog things is what it was going on, right? And then in America, you saw a lot of use toward, hey, public, why don't you marry the most athletic and strong and best person you can and make good babies? That's what was happening, right? It wasn't against, it was positive, not negative. But she hates black people. She thinks they are a lesser race, the lesser intelligence. They're a pollution to the bloodstream of any non-black person, and she needed to go about doing something to fix that. And she was very successful. And if you think eugenics has gone away, as I had said earlier, you are wrong. It's sitting very squarely in just the right neighborhoods as far as they're concerned. It's called Planned Parenthood, right?
Mhm.
And she's the creator of it. And the intention of Planned Parenthood wasn't to help women with their needs. I mean, there's some of that in there, but not really. If you go look at their funding and where they spend the money, they don't spend their money on those little things that women actually could need. They spend almost all their cash on abortion. And where do you find Planned Parenthood offices? Where are they selected and put? They're put in black neighborhoods, Latino neighborhoods, not in those white neighborhoods. White people, if they want to use Planned Parenthood, they got to travel. Right. And it was done intentionally because she wanted to keep under control, if not completely reduce and remove the black threat as she saw it. So when you talk about racism, eugenics can be used in that manner. And we'll get into more of how eugenics is used in that way later, I'm sure. But Margaret Sanger is a full-on villain, right?
Yes.
Because and it's just amazing to me that you have these people that stand up and talk about racism and you're a bunch of fascist Nazis all the time when they're the people who are always supporting this crap, right? Always, right? I mean, you think about who created the Ku Klux Klan? Democrats. Who created Jim Crow? Democrats, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm being very American specific, but this whole conversation is very American specific because America is the one that made eugenics a thing because it would have never
Hell
gone
yeah,
anywhere.
America.
Well, I'm just saying it would have gone nowhere if it wasn't for the Americans. It wouldn't have, because Galton's thing. There was people in Britain that debated it and stuff like that for a little bit, but it was kind of put to the side. It was the Americans that took that and made it a thing, right? And it's always these damn liberals and I don't know, their evil guilt. I don't even know how to calculate it. But it's always them that are bringing this pure evil crap to us, and it's unfortunate because eugenics, I think, is a useful tool. We should measure everything. Don't you want to know exactly what your strengths and weaknesses are? Wouldn't that help you lead a better life? Because this is how eugenics could help us, right? The measure of the positive and the negative. But
There's another there's another way. Let me cut in real quick. There's another way that it's also used, and it's also with abortion, that I personally think is bad. Not because of the result, but because of the means. I believe it's Iceland now has effectively eliminated in their very small population Down syndrome. It's two Icelandic people coming together will almost 100% not have a child with Down syndrome.
Yeah.
They did this through being able to test for it in utero,
Yeah.
and the mothers were allowed to abort the baby because it had Down syndrome.
That's right.
To me, as somebody whose uncle, who lived to be 71 years old, was with Down syndrome and had a basically functioning normal life, to me, that's evil. That is a wrong way of using eugenics. And in fact, I would say, as far as for the more than just the genetic benefit, but for a society, that's probably dysgenic, because eventually, if you keep filtering out the bottom forcefully, which is what abortion effectively is,
Yeah.
well, who's to say that we don't decide that anybody under 90 IQ's got to go? If we can prove in the womb that this child's maximum IQ or whatever intelligence they can ever get is 90, who's to say we don't just cut it off there? No, sorry, you got to go. Or even 100.
Yeah.
People could and will, if they given the opportunity, do this. So for me, I think that's a very negative thing to do. I don't think
Yeah.
it's something we should do. Now, as far as getting down the gene pool,
I just realized how much of Pokemon is eugenics.
It is.
Yes, it is.
It is. Yeah.
Because like
Yeah.
I always breed the strongest Pokemon I can, and then the
Yeah.
ones that aren't good enough in the IV section, they get quote unquote released in the wild.
Yeah. You geneticist,
There
you.
are ways.
Oh,
There are ways
no.
of doing that exact same thing without the first violation of the abortion. When
That's
you
true.
have to use, in my opinion, evil to get to good, you're probably not the good guy. Whether you know it or not, you're probably just an agent of evil. And
I'm sorry, Azumarill. I just wanted a strong one.
that's just one example that comes to mind because it's very recent. It was only a few years ago where scientists in Iceland declared that they had defeated Down syndrome, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And to me, I don't think that's a positive use of it. For one, we can do far greater things than get rid of a very rare, unfortunate syndrome that happens.
Mhm.
But there's so much more potential here. And like you were saying, this is something we must use because it is a tool. That's all it is. It's just like a hammer. If everybody just like all the construction people are like, you know what? These can be used to kill people, and just threw away hammers tomorrow, the world would literally fall apart. We need hammers. Hammers are important. They're a powerful tool.
Yeah.
This is the same thing that they want, that the elite, like Model was talking about, want people to do with the concept of eugenics.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter who you marry. All that matters is how much money you make. And even some people don't care about that. Doesn't matter. You shouldn't try to select a good mate. You shouldn't do any of those things. Life's too short. Just have fun. That's the modern narrative in society, especially for young women. And it's repugnant to everything that's made humanity what it is today.
You know,
I am pretty much Pokemon Hitler.
you are. But that's a very good segue that Thundero just created, actually. And before we take that segue, and I'll see if either Todd or Model want to grab a hold of that segue. To keep in mind, this is to kind of add on to it. The thing I mentioned in the beginning about the fact that we've removed ourselves from the food chain long ago, and we have spent the past thousands of years trying to make life as easy as possible. And therefore, people who are like Down syndrome, like any other congenital disease or genetic disease or whatever have you like that, can actually not only survive but thrive, I think is a good thing. There's no reason why our society cannot support and allow these people a life. We have come to that point. That does not mean, on the other hand, that you don't have to try to create the most effective child you can. Right now, we can do this in utero, but we can also do this out of utero, meaning with the education of a child. So, me personally, I think eugenics is a very useful tool. But at the same time, we've come to a point where we don't need to simply, weather that which is not desirable. Weathering mean going back to the Greeks, where they would take a deformed child and put it out into nature and allowing nature to just take its course and kill it. There's no need to do this anymore. We can allow them to have the best life they can, and I think that's a good thing. But what it does with the segue that Thundero had brought up, of course, is bringing us into genetics, and of course, one of our chat had mentioned the CRISPR stuff. And this is a very important thing because it's not about now what Iceland is doing, where they can check and see, oh, this child has Down syndrome, therefore abort it and try again. What they're doing now is with genetics, well, we can go in and fix that and make it so that this child that exists doesn't have Down syndrome or has blue eyes or what have you. And I'm kind of curious we think this is going to go, because the simple fact of the matter is, if you are given a choice, no matter what your color or what your race or your culture, ethnicity, whatever word you want to use, if you're given a choice, what kind of baby would you create? Is interesting question for me. So does Todd or Model, would you guys like to jump into the genetic part of eugenics?
I'm just kind of along for the ride because yeah.
See, Todd's a
Well,
perfect
okay.
example of what I was talking about.
Uh-oh.
It's not a dig at you, Todd, at all. I don't want you to take it that way. This is what our society has done. It is taking from us the need, like you were saying, we've gone beyond the food chain.
Yeah.
We don't have to think about this stuff anymore, but we should. It's just like, you don't have to think about, well, what would I do if I couldn't get a furnace in the winter? You should know what to do if you don't have a furnace in the winter,
Mhm.
because it could happen. Maybe you won't have a furnace next year. It goes out and you don't want to freeze if it's really cold. It's the
I'm
similar
sure they
idea.
think. I'm sure they think like royalty marrying a degree of royalty can be looked at as eugenics, but it's probably more dysgenics.
In some ways, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, my opinion is always in things like this that I have very little faith in human beings to actually act responsibly
Mm.
in the long run when it comes to this. So even among groups like royal families, elite bloodlines, or political families, and even some ethnic groups that practice a form of eugenics themselves, as far as there is a lot of inbreeding that goes on. And then you start to have these genetic diseases that seem to they stay among certain races or ethnic groups of people, and that's how a lot of that comes about. So if you are the need for eugenics really only comes up for, as far as man to step in and try to manipulate it, it only comes about because of the other advances that we have. There's no scarcity anymore. For most developed countries, there are still in other parts of the world, but um, those parts of the world, let's be honest, they're not cared about, because the amount of money that gets spent on things like militaries and things like that, just a fraction of that could take care of hunger everywhere on the planet. So it's not really even something that a lot of people are that worried about when it comes down to it.
But in truth,
But
they are practicing eugenics more than anybody else, right?
Mhm.
I mean, sorry.
Sure.
Go
Oh
ahead.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So natural selection, which I think is an important function of this, was meant to naturally take the weakest specimens out of the gene pool. And since we now have medicine that will prolong lives and do combat a lot of that you see these, you're seeing like the increases in autism, all the levels of kids that have these crazy allergies to like peanuts and stuff like that. It's through
Right.
the roof now, to the point where in the public school system, kids can't bring a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to school.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
So, and but that is showing that the genetic stock is being weakened significantly.
Yes.
But still, among these groups of elites that maybe not so much now, but if you start to look at these families and you get into the cousins and further off in the branches of the tree, they're the relations always come back, and these families always stay among their own. But
Mhm.
it's really foolish because they are hurting themselves, whether or not they know it. Um,
Well,
I'm sure they must.
I'm sure they do, yeah. But you know what that is? That is a perfect example of a lack of adaptation, is what it is. You're stuck in a rut that you're continuing on for traditional purposes because originally it was created and done intentionally. It's like first night which was used by the Normans to try to breed out the Anglo-Saxons, right? Where the ruler of the area would, any wife that was married, they would take and they would have the first night in hopes of impregnating that female to try to breed out the Anglo-Saxon and therefore produce more Norman children, right? This is an extreme form of eugenics, but these ideas of having the strongest, potential, mate is what kind of led us to these royals being the way they are. and but in an example of them sticking to it as they do, it shows you that it is a complete lack of adaptation. They cannot adapt beyond what they to improve themselves. And this is a kind of problem when you mention with peanuts and other things like that. We are no longer adapting. We are too comfortable. And this is where eugenics could be a potential major benefit. And of course, eugenics is gone in a way, the science of eugenics. But what has replaced it is genetics. Now, if you see a genetic scientist, they will yell, jump up and down, and scream that they have nothing to do with eugenics. They'll point fingers and they'll say the stupidest things to try to distance themselves from that word. But that is exactly what they're doing. What they are doing is the ultimate expression of eugenics. They are trying to manipulate the gene so that they can create the perfectly desired human, and therefore the absolute pinnacle of eugenic success, as far as looking at it as a way to improve the species. The genetic conversation for me, I think, is a very important one, because and the question I asked, I would really like to get an answer from everybody here, including the chat. If you had a choice and you could design your baby in any way you wanted, what would that baby look like?
Well, I don't think you can take it that far. I think
You can,
s-
dude.
like,
It's already here.
you're talking about cheekbones and bone,
I'm talking
bonal
about
structure.
everything,
Wow.
dude. What is not already here will be here within a decade.
Okay, but I don't think you can change bone structure.
Yes, you most certainly can change bone structure, dude. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Within 20 years, it'll be common practice for people with enough money.
Yeah. I mean, it will get to the point. I understand what Todd is saying, though, but it will get to the point, Todd, that you can actually sculpt your child from the zygote on, dude. Yeah.
What are we gonna do? We got to 3D print babies? What's going on here?
Well, or genetically design them. But hold on. I said
There's
it
hope
again.
for you, Booster.
There's hope for you.
No,
Yay!
But
for me
And your prodigy could actually, be over 5 foot.
that's true. That's true.
personally, it would definitely be. I would want it to look like me if it was my child. I mean, obviously, I think
Yeah.
most parents want their resemblance to be carried on in their offspring. But it would definitely be physically better than me. Like my
Mhm.
personal physical flaws. Like, in my opinion, I have small hands. I don't like them. Those would be bigger. He'd have a bigger frame than I do, similar to my father. Big man.
You said like big hand gloves.
Yes. Um,
Yeah.
it would be things like that. Most of it would be. Think about this. Think like you go into McDonald's right now. Right? A lot of McDonald's have these little kiosks where you can go and just pick what you want. You can select what you want on your burger. Da 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 da. Imagine in 20, 30 years you can do that with your baby. You can walk in. They give you, here's your options. What do you want to do with it? And there you go. Most people would probably pick very petty things, but of course they would also pick, a certain level of intelligence. They obviously don't want a stupid child. They don't want a child, as much as these are wonderful people, people with Down syndrome and stuff, just like I said, like my uncle who's very dear to me, who was very dear to me, unfortunately he's passed. Most people aren't going to pick. I would think probably nobody. I'm saying most people just in case there's a psycho out there who would pick somebody with some form of syndrome like that, or pick somebody who looks like they have polio, or even with polio, you could potentially do.
Well, you contract polio, but anyway, go ahead.
Yes, most people I would think would pick somebody they see as superior to them in physicality and intelligence, and in emotional stability, which is what EQ is effectively measuring. Your ability to handle stress and things like that. You would think they would. The problem is when we do get to that point, and it's very close, the people making these decisions are obviously going to be constrained by things like money, because only the really wealthy will be able to do it at top end.
Initially, yeah.
Yeah. And what we'll have is we'll have literally effectively two different versions of humanity. We'll have the normal humanity, like everybody is, like we all are, who isn't really altered too much, except for maybe by the fact that we have more food than our ancestors did. Um, and you'll have this almost, if I can use a comic book term, homo superior, that will be effectively superior. You could increase somebody's ability, the resistance to diseases. You could increase their lifespan because of this. You
Hmm.
could slow down aging. All of these things are genetic. Everybody's seen people who are in their 60s and look like they're still in their late 30s, and it's crazy, but it exists. Imagine if we could, and we will, because we're very close, track down the way to filter that.
Yeah.
And we can just do this in every child. It is something as vain as the size of a man's penis we could do. I mean, there's so
Really?
we could
Wow.
do with this, and probably will be done with this. It's a whole nother world. We are right on the edge of all this science fiction we've all grown up reading and loving and watching. Right on the edge of it in a
Yeah.
crazy way.
Yeah,
Now,
when do I get my robot arm?
Yeah.
when we talk about
Well,
like Star Trek,
that has nothing to
Star
do with what
Trek
we're
took
talking
it-
about at all, Booster.
Yes.
Hmm.
Star Trek took it to a very well. What happens when these people are this way? And you had Khan and the whole Khan storyline with Wrath of Khan and all this, and that's a very real possibility. What does happen when we make a literal superior human, physically anyway, and every physical trait is superior?
Mhm.
If we don't have the ability to create within them a moral center that is extremely strong and good, I guess you would say, a good person through this manipulation, which we probably won't, because I would think most of that is taught, not born into. What happens? It's similar. It's a similar argument with AI. What happens when we actually
If
do?
it's not already available, I don't think it will ever become available for the common person.
That's a
Because
fair argument.
in order for a society to function, you do have to have different classes. You have to have a class that is willing to be ruled and a class that is willing to rule. Because if you have a bunch of superior people walking around all over the place, I don't think you can genetically breed out like you just said some of the behavior, which can be environmental or taught.
Well, you're not
You're
breeding
always
it
gonna
out. You're not breeding it out. That's the point. You're not breeding it
No,
out.
but
What
my
you're doing
point is,
is you're
Chester, is
you're
that
sciencing it out.
yeah, but my point is that you can't have a bunch of people walking around all equal. That's a pipe dream.
Mhm.
Mm.
That a society like that will destroy itself because you are always going to have one group that wants to dominate another group. You'll never have 7 billion people all happy with their position.
True, but
There's always going to be a superior group.
we
So even if
no. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So even if you have this ability to do this, there maybe they allow the peasants to pick your eye color or your hair color, but they aren't going to let you pick your IQ. They aren't going to let you pick things like that. I guarantee that will never happen.
Well,
Going back to Star Trek, that's effectively what did happen in the Star Trek universe. Is they outlawed it to where humans especially weren't supposed to make themselves physically better, stronger, smarter, whatever.
mhm.
But I would imagine vanity was allowed, at least to some degree.
Well,
So that would be the only other recourse that the lesser humans would have. Would be they have numbers on their side, obviously. So it would move the superiors to at least listen to their demands because they're outnumbered.
yeah, but we need to take a look at what happened in reality. We have seen eugenic programs used across the planet, and what we saw in all of those was a desire to improve the population. So I agree with model in a way. The upper echelon, the upper limit of it may be simply not announced to the public and the elite keep it to themselves. Sure. But the elite would like to see an improvement, an overall improvement in humanity for their own selfish needs. And then we've seen this happen already. It's already played out in reality. And I don't think it would be different in the future. So although I think that they would limit or restrict certain things, they wouldn't tell you they're doing this, but they would do it behind the scenes. I think that actually there will be an allowance of improvement, and they'll make it expensive so it's desirable, and then they'll make it cheaper and everybody will jump on board, just like it's very easy to manipulate populations, right? And I think that it will be very usable, if not limited. And I don't think it's just eye color. I think because we've seen in every use of it across the planet, it's always intended to make a superior working force, is what it's been used
Hmm.
for, right?
Well, you could take it even to, and this will take it a little bit more towards the racial aspect, but it's just reality of history. Europeans, at least 700 years ago until today, were able to quite literally conquer basically anywhere in the world they wanted to with far less numbers than everywhere else. Like there were some of the battles that were waged, even in America, against the natives that nobody even, it's not common in history to even know about it, but they were massively outnumbered by the Indians,
Oh
massively.
yeah, yeah.
And look where we are now, right? So a lot of that is because of eugenics. They had physical traits that were just better, and they had a system that they didn't understand they were using eugenics, but that's exactly what they were doing when it came to socially, how how people bred, and especially the upper classes, the aristocracies and things. They definitely very stringently guarded this. I mean, even to the point where, if you want to take it to like the Jews, there was a time when Jews were seen extremely undesirable in Europe as a people. They didn't want them there, but that led to dysgenic forces for them because they had to do whatever they could to survive. However, once they were more stable, and really it was about the 1800s, they started in programs and took the idea of the aristocratic eugenics and went crazy with it. And eventually they just became largely the most intelligent people on the planet, but by and large, depending on how you measure it.
Mhm.
And they did this in very little time, really, when you think about the course of human history, just through using selective breeding, just through having that mean Jewish mother who would always yell at you to make sure you marry the right person. That's all it took. It wasn't some forced program. It wasn't a bunch of abortions here, there, or wherever. I'm not
Yeah.
saying they don't do that. That wasn't what did it. What
Mobilize
did
the
it was,
mothers. Yeah.
yeah, just mothers who wouldn't let their children marry somebody that they considered inferior.
And that's what the
And
Americans did too in the early 20th century, dude. Same thing.
yes, the Irish did it. The
Mhm.
Italians did it. The early Italian immigrants that came over here, many of them were really dumb. They were poor Italian farmers from Italian farmers, and or many of them were. And within time, there was great Italian inventors that were from here. So it didn't take very long, and it doesn't take very long. The reason why for me it's a TFT topic mainly is because it's like you're talking about. Once we get the ability to manipulate this with science, just straight up type it in a computer, bam, and it happens. Well, the elite aren't going to let that filter down entirely because they would damage their position, right? They wouldn't be able to keep their position forever. So what we have effectively the same thing now. It just takes a lot more work. They make sure it's not talked about. They demonize it in propaganda all over the place, all the time. They make sure that people think it's okay to just screw whoever you want. Da 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 da. There's no consequences. None, it doesn't matter. All people are the same. All cultures are equal. It's all the same crap designed to keep
Yeah, that's
the other
nonsense.
people below them so that they don't get challenged. That's all it is.
If I might bring an anthropological point into this conversation, and of course, anthropology and eugenics have always been together. But you mentioned about the Europeans being so successful and defending against, you weren't specific, but the Mongol hordes, for instance, the Muslim attacks, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the Europeans being so successful in war and all the success they had was more of a mental factor than a physical one, actually. I think the Europeans had this idea, they used to, whereas other places in the world, they would do horrific things in battle for as a tool of war, right? Just some horrible, grotesque, terrifying terrorism was simply a tool that was used to terrify the enemy. It wasn't a mindset. Whereas the Europeans are pretty much like, oh, F you, dude, and they're going to
Right.
come at you and they're going to tear you apart and maul you and maim you because you deserve it. It's a
Yes.
different mentality. And I think that mentality, the ability to go truly brutal, is what really gave the Europeans that advantage. And of course, this is what you get as the core, because these kids are being taught by these broken professors, taught that this is why they're so anti. Colonialism, anti-white, and stuff. It's kind of at the core of it these days, because they're looking at the pure, raw brutality of the Europeans and not looking at the creativity and the the cultural benefit that came from the Europeans. And so it's weird because they're not wrong, but they're also very narrow of sight. Model has something
Yes.
he wants to say.
No, I'm good.
Oh,
I do. It came to me when you started talking about that. One of the other things that Europe had and largely doesn't have anymore, and it's a tragedy, was a very martial culture.
oh yeah.
Everybody was fighting against everybody at some point or another. Even within the same countries, they'd have constant, dukes and stuff would fight against each other. Now, they would never generally go total war on each other like you're talking about because they've seen each other as, cousins or brothers or whatever. But when it came to outsiders, yeah, they'd go total war and lay waste to entire civilizations if they had to. That martial culture was a very great example of the idea that, I don't see European culture as good morally in that regard, like the martial aspect of it. But it just reminded me of the show Doctor Who before it became what it is now. And there was a line in there where somebody threatens the doctor and said they're not afraid of him because because he's a good man and he has too many rules. And the doctor shoots back with, "Good men don't need rules. Would you like to see why I have so many?" That's the exact
Yeah.
thing you're talking about.
That's the
European,
doctor. Yeah.
Europeans
That's the
have
real one.
Yeah, that's a good line. Europeans have always had, even in war, they have really strong rules that they just wouldn't break for the most part until they didn't anymore, and then it was not good for anybody. Then you have
Sure.
world wars, wars like the Napoleonic Wars,
Uh-huh.
things like this, where tens of millions of people are slaughtered, and they could do it with a less force. But that was largely because of the martial culture affecting how they chose to breed and creating a better warrior. They
Yeah.
had white people, even today, are the strongest of all racial groups. Scandinavian women are stronger than most men on this planet,
Are you
including the
talking
Indian.
about genetically?
Yes.
Oh,
No, I
okay.
mean physically, even
Yeah,
physically stronger.
yeah, I get what
They
you're
have a
saying.
physical strength just naturally because of genetics. Yes.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they're better people. I'm not making a value judgment based on that, but this is a trait of humanity: is physical strength.
Oh no, each
Physical strength, they are
racial
better.
group has their own physical advantages and disadvantages for sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that allowed Europeans of all different cultures in Europe, in fact, to conquer everywhere. Everywhere, once they finally got out of Europe, it was game on. I mean, there was no one who could really resist until very recently, historically.
Yeah, well, and that's why you see a lot of the Black Americans have such an advantage in sports. It's because you're taking those great physical traits from the actual Africans, and you're
Yep.
adding in that strength from the Caucasians, and you're getting this very physically capable human, right? Because me personally, I mean, black is fine. We can use that word, but really, what they are is mulatto. And that
Mhm.
mulatto mix is very, very effective physically. But to give you an example of what I was talking about with the Europeans, a lot of people have this misconception, which I blame Hollywood, of course. I blame a lot of things on Hollywood, and I mean the concept of Hollywood, by the way. A lot of people think the Indians scalped people, which they did. But who taught them to do this? The French,
Yep.
right? That's not an Indian tradition. That's not something coming out of the Indian culture. That's something they learned from us, right? And there's a lot of examples of that actually. Those old Europeans, man, they would, if you came at them, they'd make you pay for it, and they would absolutely humiliate you and terrify you, not because it was a tool of war, but because damn it, you deserve it. It's a very different mindset.
A world where the French are badasses.
They do. The French used to be serious badasses, man.
I
Well,
know they were
What happened?
unbelievable.
where do you think the middle finger comes from? We in America, we flip the bird, as it were, and of course now it's all around the world uses it. But where do you think that
I
came from?
I was taught that it was Native Americans.
No,
That
it's
it
not.
was a way of showing that they still have their middle finger because they'd use it to pull a string on a bow and arrow.
No, my God, you are
That's
so
what
misinformed. That
that
just
yeah, that's
makes
what
me
I was taught.
sad, Booster. No, it's
Oh, okay.
actually coming
Well,
from the English.
enlighten me.
I'm going to. It's coming from the English, and it used to, and they still use it today. It's not a single middle finger. It's the middle finger and the pointer
Yes.
finger together being
Yes.
held up forward, not reversed in the peace symbol, the reverse of that. And it's showing the French that I still have my bow fingers because the English longbowmen were absolutely devastating force on the battlefield, and the French, if they could capture any of them, they would cut their fingers off to reduce the numbers. So it's actually it's an American simplification, as we always do, and just a single finger instead. It's not coming from the Native Americans
So I was
whatsoever.
right about the bow part. That's
You
funny.
were, but it
Yes.
disgusts me. You disgust me, Booster.
I'm sorry. I'll whip myself later. Oh,
But come on, model Todd, you guys got to have something to say for this conversation. I'm kind of surprised we haven't diverged very much. We've stayed on topic, dude. It's
I'm
interesting.
surprised no one's going. How dare you?
Have you guys seen Idiocracy?
No.
Mhm.
Yes.
The movie, that little montage in the beginning that shows the two families, the two professional people who keep saying, "Oh, we're going to wait, we're going to hold off on having kids," and then they show the other family, who of course is a dumb white trash family, but how their family tree is just exploding. That's the one thing in this whole eugenics movement with Planned Parenthood is the one thing that I don't know if they have it completely figured out or if there's a plan, because you do need a certain population that can work and pay for all these services. But when I think one of the unintended consequences of abortion was that the nominally smarter people are the ones that ended up getting more abortions because they had aspirations of bettering themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's
you
fair.
have people that kind of are goal oriented, are concerned about their future, who would go off and terminate a pregnancy so that it wouldn't affect their career
Mhm.
and then I don't think that was an intended consequence, and I just wonder what the overall goal in the end to deal with that is, because you can't have everyone on public assistance.
True, but I
Somebody
mean,
has to be out there putting labor in.
true, but I
Well, they
think
got robots for that.
well, I think the overall goal was met, though. I agree with you on that. I think that's exactly a side effect they didn't see, but the overall goal I think has been met in a way, because do keep in mind there are as many aborted black babies in America as there are black people in America today.
Yes, absolutely.
If that
Which
number
is
doesn't
tragic.
shudder you to your very core, I don't know what to say.
That
It's
is
utterly
insane.
tragic and evil.
Yeah.
And the worst part about it is that it was pure hatred, like you were talking
Oh
about.
yeah.
Her pure hatred, using science to twist her own reasoning and her own motivations and what she actually did. Um, Science is a tool; it can be used for good or evil. It's up for mankind to decide.
Hmm.
She chose to use it for evil, and it's obvious evil because there's nothing in black people that makes them inferior to anybody. I'm not a supremacist. I don't want anybody to take that away from this. They absolutely can and are equals to everybody else with the right amount of work in. And they were proving that. That's one of the reasons Planned Parenthood and all these things came so big and went to their neighborhoods, was to shut that down.
Yeah.
Because they were in America catching white people in every metric that you can quantifiably measure. And they were starting to build their own markets. They were starting to build their own economy around themselves because they weren't allowed in many places to engage directly in the normal economy, the main economy. So they did many things to shut that down. And in my opinion, I think that was one of them. They gave them an easy out to being parents and being good parents. And unfortunately, people will generally take the easy out when they're given the option.
Well, and there is a campaign poster from the turn of the 20th century. I can't remember what president it was, but his Democratic president. And he, on his campaign poster, he had a very sophisticated, gentlemanly looking man and the word Democrat underneath of it. And then he had a very Nubian, exaggerated Nubian looking black man in an actual suit of the time, and then underneath it was written Republican.
Yep.
Yeah, very interesting. The thing, because we're talking about Sanger, and of course she wasn't alone. The thing with that is, we kind of gloss over IQ, and I understand why, because no one ever wants to talk about IQ. The thing with it, IQ is not a completely genetic factor. It's also environmental. And IQ really only, when you talk about racial IQ, it only really matters at the top end, right? And it's the same thing when you get in a conversation of brain makeup, like for instance, gray matter and stuff like that. It only matters at the very, very, very high end of things. And of course, you're talking about a very extremely small percentage of of an entire generation. So it doesn't really matter. You can have that conversation, but it doesn't matter. But if you talk about the center line, you're right in the middle, right? And if the environment is completely equal, you're going to have a generally balanced IQ across all racial groups. Now,
Yes.
there is a genetic aspect which you cannot talk about. I don't know why. We can say that the Africans are physically more capable than the other races when it comes to athleticism. You can say that the Asians are more nimble, have better hand-eye coordination, and you can say the Europeans are the most physically powerful build because they have bigger bones. That seems to be fine. But you can't then come in and start talking about intelligence capability because no, we're all the same, which is nonsense. Of course, we're not. If you want to talk about the black people, for instance, they're clearly superior to everyone when it comes to language abilities. The
Hmm.
Africans are just will blow everybody away. If you can go to Africa and find African, some dude sitting in a freaking hut and can speak a dozen languages. That is not normal. Black people are really good at that. But there's
Even
also
speaking even speaking to that, their languages in Africa, many of them are great. When you learn them and can actually communicate with them, they're fantastic. They're so
yeah.
simple, they're so direct, they're smooth. They're not like English, which is a mess. They're
Well, English is
extremely
young, is why.
simple. Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, so there's a physical advantage. I mean, a mental advantage blacks have. There are also mental disadvantages that they have racially, not the individual, the race. And there are, just as there are physical positive and negative points to every group, there are also mental ones. But in the end, it doesn't mean much because the environment can overcome that. And this is where in America it is so sad, I guess. I'll just use the simple word sad because there's no reason why the entire black population in America could not be basically equal to all the white population or Latinos or Asians or whatever. Of course, you're going to have little advantages here and there, but there's no reason. The reason they're not is because within the ghettoite environment, the ghettoite culture, it's actually seen as being you're an Uncle Tom if you go and study and learn something. You're some kind of coon, and it's like, how in the hell did we get to that? They're
Well,
killing
in
themselves, dude.
in fairness to them, there's other parts. If we're going to divide this racially, there's other parts in other of white culture that has the exact same mindset. Hillbillies would be a great example. They have a very similar culture. Actual hillbillies. I'm not talking about when somebody just calls everybody who's white a hillbilly. I mean actual people who are you would call a
Appalachians,
hillbilly.
yeah.
Yeah, they have a very similar culture. They don't got time for your book learning. They even sound the same when you think about it. Like their vernacular is very similar to the ghettoized people, the blacks and the whites. Um, it's because it's I don't know. I don't know what causes it. It's a weird cultural identity they adapt of ignorance as a virtue.
hmm
Um,
It's a bit of
and
xenophobia, I think.
it needs to die. It's killing humanity as a whole because what's happening is the people who don't have that of all races see these people and they want to help them because we're humans and we care about people. We have empathy and we understand that their situation is obvious madness. You can't live like that for generations. That's insane. But what happens is then we spend all these energy and all this time and resources where if that just simply wasn't the cultural norm of that region, of that people, whatever,
hmm
we could spend it on doing things that are incredible. We could spend it on finding ways to the stars. We could spend it on finding ways to make humans better as a group, all of us, not just one race.
Yeah,
But we're not doing that because for some reason, these other groups just, not all of them, I mean, hashtag not all, in fact, not most, but enough don't want to adapt. They just want to wallow in
yeah.
ignorance,
And
and
that
it's so sad.
it is sad.
So sad.
And that's why the Appalachians are the poorest group in America, actually. Whereas on the other hand, they're not very violent. Whereas the black community obviously has a ridiculous level of environments of violence in their culture, and I think in some ways this is genetic as well. And you say, well, that's a horrible thing to say. No, it's not. They live in an extremely deadly environment originally in Africa.
Mhm.
You take many other races, you throw them in Africa, they're dead in a week, right?
Yep.
The black people's survival in Africa is impressive unto itself, and therefore creating extremely aggressive human that is capable of getting it done is a mental aspect that is very valuable. Natural selection, right? And of course, it pervades through them. Right, it's the same thing. Like if you look at it, things instead of racially, if you look at as far as in a gender-based way, for instance, women are naturally selfish. Now you say, "Oh, that's horrible. How can you say that about a woman?" Well, they are, and there's a genetic purpose for it because they're protecting the baby and therefore keeping the gene pool moving forward. It's built
Yes.
into women to be selfish, as it is built into men to stand up to the damn lion, right? It's built into your
Mm.
DNA, whether you like it or not. And there are certain aspects like this. And for us to not sit and talk about these things is foolish because we can improve things. When it comes to intelligence, environment can overwhelm it because we're talking about the average. We're not talking about the extreme edges of it. We're talking about the average. And there's
Mhm.
no reason why the black people in America cannot be functioning just like everybody else at that average level. There's no reason. But it's being caused because of stupid culture. That's the
Yep.
problem. Because you can go find plenty of black people who are just American. They're not black at all, and they're living normal American lives, doing normal American stuff, just as everybody else is. It's a cultural aspect. It's not a genetic aspect. Because when it comes down to it, the genetic disparity between the races, when it comes to IQ, is not enough to make an actual difference. And it really kind of someone mentioned Stephen Molyneux. Stephen Molyneux, I appreciate him making the conversations, but he also is missing kind of the point because he wants to talk about the extreme. And yes, the Asians are the smartest of us at the extreme. True. But it doesn't matter at the center, which is where 99% of us live. It doesn't matter. There's not enough difference to matter. The real difference that is killing in this conversation, black people specifically in America, is the education thing, and it applies to the Appalachians. But then when you put the genetic application of a violent nature, which comes out of the Africans, which is a survival aspect, when you put that on top of low education, Jesus. That's why you have murders every damn week in black cities. That's why their population can't grow. That's why you have people like Margaret Sanger that could come in and take advantage of of these people and their paranoia and their cultural dismissiveness of other cultures and use it against them. This is the problem. This is the conversation that needs to be taking place across the Western world because we are wasting resources, we are wasting people. The black communities do not need to be sitting in the situations they are. It is an evil thing that is taking place and is being allowed to continue because there's a group of people who want it that way, and then there's everybody else who's afraid to talk about it, and it's ridiculous.
And it's
Well,
also.
one
Go ahead.
political party in this country has done such a huge disservice to that group of people by putting a just putting low expectations on them. And that's
Yeah,
about the worst thing you can do for any person is
Mm.
to just automatically give them a pass for not achieving
yeah,
Yes.
that's fair.
and then give every excuse and uh, taking away the ability to even be critical, in which you'll see even when you remember when Bill Cosby kind of made his comments. Of course, that's before he had his other problems, but he was known to stand up and say, you know, a lot of this we have to go back into our own communities and look at why there's all this violence
Yeah,
against each other.
yeah,
And he was just destroyed by everybody.
yeah.
Well, it's also like you're talking about the violent aspect. They also generally have a very high testosterone too, which
They
also
do.
doesn't help aggression when it comes to things. But it does help when it's directed properly.
Oh, sure.
Again, I go back to ancient philosophies, pretty much all of them. Anger is a natural part of you. Now you want to control that and focus it into something positive. That's what you should be doing. This can be done, and millions of black people in America have done it. The problem is they've been raised in a culture that says that it's wrong to try to better yourself, even not just in intelligence, or not only in intelligence, but in any way. Like they don't think it's good. You know, you're from the hood. That's where you need to stay. That's where you belong.
It's been incentivized
Yeah.
with
Yes.
money.
Yes, with literal, actual, physical, tangible money. But I actually, and it might sound a little cringy, but for reality's sake, you know, I know a lot of people who most people would probably consider deep racists. I know them. Some of them are in my family, in fact. And I've told them from the beginning, it's not about the race. Race is very important. It's very much a reality, especially for the minority races in America. They have to live with it every day. But it is so for white people too. We just have this luxury of, you know, we don't talk about it. And really, it's just ignorance in a lot of ways. But
Well, we
it's
don't
not the end all.
care.
Yes, it's not the end of the road. And one of the reasons white people are like that is because our culture has spread across the entire world,
Yeah.
and we've seen that people are basically the same. Yeah, we have different motives in some places. We have different abilities here, there, or whatever. But when it comes right down to it, every single human person on this planet acts when incentivized to act. All of us. There is no unique group of people. There's no special group of people, no chosen group of people who doesn't act that way. Every single person, when given the right incentive, will always make the right choice.
Well, except the Jews.
I knew you were going to say that, because that's how the human mind works. It's based on desire. It's not rational thought. I wish it was, but that takes a lot of work, a lot of work to become a truly rational actor. It's not, you know, even necessarily what's best for other people around you, sometimes even your family. It's desire, it's incentive. That's what drives humanity forward. So that's why I actually, and I say this all the time to these people, I believe in Black Americans especially, and Africans too, but Black Americans, because I know the history of Black Americans, what they went through, what they've gone through, and where they're at now doesn't have to be their destiny. They can be more than that. They were more than that. It's been a 50 years, 60 years, however long it's been, of just the elites in this country, not all of them, but enough of them, doing everything they can to undermine that community's ability to grow, into the point of, like Model was talking about, they want everybody to be this weird brown mix of relatively low IQ or moderate IQ people, bringing in people from the third world to displace Black people out of the jobs that allowed them to get a stepping stone up into the middle class and out of that poverty.
Well, they take booster jobs too.
Yes, this is all of it. This is all of the things we're talking about. The people at the top want to make sure the people at the bottom don't figure out how to read. It's the same thing that it's always been. They keep people from that knowledge because knowledge is power.
Isn't it shocking that there is actually illiteracy in America?
Yes.
Yeah. Booster, can you do me a favor and chime in with some chat, please?
Oh yeah, I could, but what they're saying isn't that great.
Come on, dude.
Well, Joe
Hey, can
Marone
you guys talk about something exciting?
Yeah, so I can actually rethink, and also I can't bloody chime in with you. I can't get in with you guys. You're on a bloody roll. You don't shut the hell up.
Well, I just made space for you. Go ahead.
Well, Joe Marone didn't really care for the hillbilly term. He says we prefer the term sons of soil. Thank you kindly.
There you go. All right, I do apologize.
What does he say? Biologically speaking, they can live like that for generations. I guess they're talking about the blacks in Africa or something. Miel says people like that are all over. Even here, we have a lower class groups of people who genuinely don't like it when one of their own try to prove themselves. I believe he's talking about the culture of ignorance that Fundara was talking about.
Yep.
And Joe Marone again says we're in Stephen Molyneux territory. Joe Marone also says men propose, women dispose. I agree. Women are awful. Me Grimlock King 83 says there's a couple of factors as to why blacks are adverse to intelligence. Well, do list them out. Nick C says Jesus has nothing to do with this, Chester. You gotta leave Jesus out of this. Leave baby Jesus out of this, Chester.
The baby Jesus.
Baby Jeebus. Jim Moran says too much emotionalism, not enough reason and objectivity in some communities. Cosby was crucified for it. Now we're really getting into the ghost in the machine, the tribunal brain, reptilian, mammalian cortex.
True. That's true.
A lot of us being politicized.
You know, I went to a
people,
high
depletion
school
mode.
in Charlotte, North Carolina. That was, I would say, it was about 60-40 black. So there was a little bit more black students, and those guys were horrible to each other. I mean, there was very little racial tension between whites and blacks, but I saw so many times black kids just being brutal to each other, making fun of the nerd who was trying to study. I mean, just absolutely awful.
Yeah. It's called. That's my point. And once again, Stefan Molyneux is mentioned. Now, I enjoy Stefan in certain things, but I think he's wrong in one way. He wants to focus on IQ as being the beginning and end of all things. It's not, because when we come down to the absolute conversation about humanity, we're dealing with the average. We're not dealing with the extremes. The extremes are the ones who keep us moving forward. When we talk about the day-to-day application of life, there's really the IQ doesn't come into it so much. It's environmental. The environmental point is very true. Now, Stefan's not wrong when he lists out things like, the Asians are the highest IQ, the whites are sitting in the middle, and the black and Latinos are below that. Sure, okay, fine, but it doesn't apply to actual life. Because what really matters is the environment, and we're seeing this being played out perfectly in America, because you have the ghetto whites and then the Americans, which are just happen to be black. It's the dispersion between the two is insane. Because the ones who are just black people who live in America, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're everything else that everybody else is, because they are the mean, just like the rest of America, because America has a mean, right? A median number, right? It is the ghettoites that are a problem, and they are a serious problem, and it's an environmental issue that needs to be dealt with. It's not an intellectual one. So.
And in any group, not just blacks, in any group where these issues are occurring, you have a very small vocal minority that is being presented as a majority, and it's just not true. It's I've talked to people about this before. I'm down in the South and near Atlanta, and you do not see people treating people badly. You do not see racism. It just doesn't happen. You don't see attitudes between blacks and whites, but it is presented as if there is this huge problem in America, and it's not. I'm telling you, it's not out there.
No, that's true. Yeah.
Of course, you have pockets. Like you have murder. Murder is illegal. You can be killed and put to death for murder. People still murder. So these things still happen. But it's not a norm. If you just like came from another planet and watched the news and read newspapers and magazines here for a week, you would think that there's just absolute horror going on in this country, and there's not.
No. One other thing that it actually speaks to what you're talking about, like you said, intelligence, while extremely important, especially as a measure of financial success for somebody, because smarter people generally are more successful, it doesn't measure you as a person. Even your financial success doesn't measure you as a person. Chester's probably more financially successful than all of us here, I'm assuming. That's just an assumption. And even he would have the humility to say he's not a better person than probably everybody here.
No,
because
that's a big assumption.
I don't know about that. Yeah,
that's not what measures. That's not the measure of a man. It's part of the measurement, but it's not all of it. And wisdom.
Well, actually,
my measurement's just fine, Thundero.
Wisdom is extremely important. That is the measure of a man. And that does not correlate as strongly to intelligence as a lot of people would have you believe. In fact, as long as you're of even moderate intelligence, you can be as wise as anybody on the planet. Because wisdom is something you generally learn. You can teach it, but it's better if it's learned. And as long as you're capable of learning, which most human beings are, anybody can be wise. So when people like Molyneux focus a lot on intelligence, which is very important, and it's a great measure of success financially and things of this nature, it's not the most important. And the fact that he doesn't talk about things like wisdom and philosophy as strongly as he should compared to the science aspect, which is intelligence,
Yeah.
it's concerning to me that he's lost himself in his own rhetoric in a lot of ways.
Me, Grimlock King. I love the name.
He's coming.
Go ahead,
Yes,
dude.
I asked for the hot tag. And
You've got
she
it.
gave to me.
Go ahead, dude.
You wanted to be tagged in.
Because since this part of the section's a bit close to the vest for me, as you guys already know, I am the resident half-breed of fan speak.
Mhm.
And yeah, there is that certain aspect of blacks being averse to intelligence, and yeah, like to say what Chester was talking about. Yeah, for some reason, blacks have allowed the most ghetto part of our culture to be the representatives of our culture.
Mhm.
It's it's the it's the most ignorant. It's the most ignorant of the ignorant, and a lot of that also has to do. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. A lot of it has to do with manipulation from the left,
It does.
because if you look at the media, you look at how things are portrayed, you always see the most ignorant of the group. It's kind of like back in the day when you used to make that joke that whenever there was a tornado, they would always find the hillbilly to have on the interview. Well, everything when it comes to black people, they always find the most ignorant black person they can find to put on TV.
There's no
Like,
question. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
That ain't nobody got time for
Like-
that woman.
Ain't got
Yeah,
time for
like-
that.
Mhm.
Like, you're not gonna see too many news stories about a black female scientist or a black female lawyer or doctor or whatever. But you know what you have heard about nonstop for almost 2 months, and Chester may not know because I know you're in Japan. Oh, Lizzo, a fat slob, a fat ignorant slob.
Ooh, I don't know a Lizzo.
Why? You don't need to know.
Yeah, you're better off.
You don't.
I'm Googling it.
Uh-oh.
Go ahead, continue.
But yeah, oh yeah, that's what gets the press in black culture. That's what you're gonna see on the TV 90% of the time. And also, to go back to what Thundaro was saying, yeah, black people post Civil War was trying to build in. They was catching up, and then every time it seems like they would catch up, something would happen. Like, oh, we're just gonna bomb Black Wall Street. We're gonna set this entire city on fire. We're gonna set this entire area on fire, and then the same people who authorized those kind of bombings turned around and told black people, well, you're a victim. You're a constant victim. Learn victimhood and never strive for anything because you're always going to be a victim of white supremacy. The same people, people on the left as usual, who preach victimhood and say, oh, it's the Republicans that are holding black people down, when historically it's been shown that it was the left that held them down. And black people, for some reason, adopted this. They never looked into it. They never questioned it. They just took it. So
That's not going to last forever, though, because a lot of Black Americans are breaking party lines.
Which is a good
Across
thing.
a lot of them.
Yeah. I found
A lot of
Lizzo,
them
by
are,
the
yes,
way.
that's
I
true.
found Lizzo. I found it. It's on screen.
Oh no, you throw your images up there on
I found
YouTube.
it. Dude,
Oh,
No,
you
dude,
this
hey.
is a bad example of eugenics right
hey,
here.
dude,
This is a
no,
bad
no. Big girls ride for free, baby.
Look, I don't have a problem with her being big, but
Nah.
the way you carry yourself, does it always have to be the bottom fucking wrong? Does it always have to be that wrong?
Bam.
And
That's the media. That's
it's
the left.
It's been that problem.
Okay,
Well, it's even
30
Yeah.
years.
this
well,
right here
they're
is
even
wrong.
doing that now
This
and
is
have been for a few
unacceptable.
years to
This is-
fathers,
this is
like for
very-
about
this
20,
is
30
wrong.
years. Just
Yeah,
just the idea of a father, they're always stupid. They're always incompetent or an idiot, or he
That's a
means
fair
well.
point.
No, that's not reality. Most homes in the United States that have a father, he's the man of his house. That's just reality. No matter what side of the spectrum they're on, even the left, the Democrats, I should say, not the left, but the Democrats.
I have to add to
Most
this.
men in America are the men of their house. They let the woman make most of the decisions, but when it comes down to rubber meets the road, daddy puts his foot down and his woman listens. I don't think I'm unique in that. I think most men live that way, and they know they do.
Well,
You guys just keep
that
talking. I'm doing my own thing.
It's a
well,
long
that's
established fact that Chester doesn't like white women, so you may have just set him on an all-day journey here.
But I mean, we've talked about this before, Thundaro, about how there was just 15 years ago, black people was demonizing Donovan McNabb, saying he was not black enough
Yep.
for
Right.
basically committing the sin of having coming from a two-parent household where both parents worked and daddy didn't beat mom and they sent him to a good school and they kept him out of trouble. They said he wasn't black enough, but somebody who came from the ghetto who acted ghetto and basically ghetto culture almost cost him his not only his career but his life, and Michael Vick, they loved that. They championed him
Yeah,
Yep.
it's a very
because
ironic thing. Yeah. Now I know. Just ask you a question because I don't know anything about pop culture in America really. But my son told me he was visiting for the holidays. He's because the kids over here they enjoy hip hop and stuff like that as all young people do. But he was telling me there was some very young, like 17-year-old hip hop artist who just died like very recently from the same thing you're talking about. Who's this kid again?
I don't know. That's been that in and of itself is becoming a common theme over the
The
last few
gangland
I
type of
can't
years.
remember
activity.
his name
Yeah.
either, actually,
It's
off
not,
the top of my head.
it's not even gangland. It's freaking pill poppers.
Oh wow. Okay.
Between the fake gangsters and the pill poppers, they're just offing themselves at a stupid rate, and for what?
Yeah, no, that's kind of
I
the whole
mean,
point of the conversation. I mean, because there's so many Americans in here, we did lean into the one of the big problems with the eugenic conversation with Margaret Sanger, and of course the attack against the black community that's been going on for I don't know ever since they Abraham Lincoln emancipated them, I think, from a certain
oh,
group of elites, and it's an ongoing problem. And for me, some people would simply say, "Well, good, let them kill themselves." And where I might agree with this with the Muslims, I don't necessarily think we are better off if we're losing, half a dozen to a dozen Americans every week. I don't think that's a good thing.
no, it's not. But this is what's happening when you're having a small group of people tell everybody that
Mhm.
they're victims and they're all victims to one people, and that one people ain't really their enemy.
No, that's true. And this is
I
something
mean,
that's been politically used for over 100 years. But once again, just to reiterate, glass parking lot, Middle East, yes. Yeah, other stuff, no.
A human being without hope is a dangerous animal.
yeah,
Yeah, that is a very good point. Yeah. Now, guys, we've been going on here for nearly 2 hours, which is great. It's been great conversation, and it's interesting. We didn't veer off topic, which I thought we would, but we haven't. As you can see, there's a lot to talk about here with eugenics. And thank you very much for coming in, Grimlock.
And we only got a little bit racist.
We didn't get racist at all. That's kind of the point. There was zero racism. Matter of fact,
But
what
we
I
have a
heard.
black man who agrees with us, so that means not racist now.
Well, no, I think what you saw was an honest conversation about a problem. When you have one community in a population that is committing over 50% of all the crime, there's a problem. And then you have to look at that problem. Then when you go and take a look at that problem and you see, well, there's manipulation going on, and that manipulation is most directly affected by a eugenics plan to reduce and keep their population down, if not simply genocide in general, then you have to start talking about it and say, hey, wait, this isn't right. This community doesn't need to
well,
be in this situation. So that's not
well, not
racism. That's
not
actually pro racism.
yeah, not just 50% of all crimes, but almost 40% of all abortion.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, yeah.
Shit.
Very true.
Tragic.
Yeah,
Literally
and you know what's even sadder about that, if you really break it down and get real about those statistics, it's like you'll commonly hear like say 12, 13% of the population, but it's really not. The violent
like
crime
3.
is about 6 to 3 because of the age difference in males, but then the abortion
It's
is the
3%.
same. It's about 3% of women that are having 40% of all the abortions. That's crazy.
And I don't know what the number is now, but when I was doing my studies way back, of course, these things come up in anthropology, of course. When I was younger, 27%, excuse me, not 27%, 27 years old was the average age of a black man in America. Has that improved or worsened?
I'm
27
not
is
sure.
pretty young, guys.
Yeah, I'm not
It's
sure.
not gotten a lot better, I don't think.
No, it can't. It probably can't have because most killings to black men are by other black men, and they're under the age of 30.
It's
Yeah.
true.
If it's improved, it's a very small increment at best.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a terrifying statistic right there. But anyway,
How many times do you really run into the funky old black dude,
You
which
don't.
those guys are a riot. They're awesome.
I will say this, and some people might say this is messed up, but if you're a black man who actually has a job, you run into that old black man all the time. But yeah,
Mhm.
you actually have to get up and go to work.
Yeah, it's a
Yep.
problem.
Or that sweet old black lady who calls you sugar and honey. Oh,
Oh
I
God,
love
I'm
those.
bringing her
I love
back.
those.
Lizzo's coming back. She's coming back. I'm going to find her
If
again.
I ever
I want
if I ever get like a life threatening illness or something, I want an old black woman to deliver it to me because it's not going to sound nearly as bad coming from her.
it's true.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
baby, I'm sorry to tell you, but you got stage 4 prostate cancer.
oh God,
Mm,
jeez,
Aw.
no.
Hey, that sounds
And
It's
alright.
all
and
right. I was tired of living anyway.
you're right. And Thunder, just to make a correction, I don't hate white women. I just am obsessed by a certain color of women. All right, so
Oh,
back it up.
Mhm.
But anyway, guys, we're definitely at the
Uh-huh.
end of the show. So what I'm going to do?
White woman.
No, it's
This
it's
is
the yellow
this eugenics
women.
conversation. This eugenics conversation has all been about Chester getting rid of the white woman. This is all it's about.
Shh. All right. We're going to do is we're
He
going
wants
to
to genetically make a race of Asian women.
do the Asian women are superior.
I mean,
I
Yeah.
mean, if you could spare a couple, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Anyway, moving along, we're going to do here is I'm going to have each person give their closing comments because we do need to get out of here. But it's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. So let me start with Thundero. Actually, no, I'm going to finish with Thundero. Let me start with Booster and go all the way and end with Thundero. So go ahead, Booster. Closing comments. here.
Racism is super bad.
I agree.
What about Hitler?
Oh, Hitler, just total meanie, a real bully.
All right, there you go. Todd.
Flat girls are real.
Flat girls are real.
Good,
So this
good
is where I
contribution
need
to the stream,
genetic
Todd.
manipulation so I can fix that problem in the Asian population and put some tits on some
Mhm.
women over here, proper tits. That's
Yeah.
that's
Then you
what
would
we
have
need.
some real women's.
That's right.
Well,
That's right.
considering I had a question, I never got to it, but considering how regionally we all have sort of an appearance, like Japanese have the eyes that slant this way, Chinese have the eyes that slant that way.
Sure.
How did that actually come about if we all come from we all originate from somewhere?
Well, there's multiple answers to that, and that is a show unto itself, Todd. But I would simply use the simple term that started out our conversation: natural selection.
yes.
Yeah.
To
It's deeper than
answer it
that,
a little bit more deeply, eugenics is just the name for the science we use to measure the force that creates eugenics. That's all it is.
Mhm.
That happens regardless of whether we have a term for it or not. It will continue to happen, and that's why you have these differences, some of which are beneficial, especially in the environment they're from. Others are not. Like black people's dark skin is very beneficial for them in Africa. White people's white skin is very beneficial for them, especially Scandinavians, in that temperate, very cool climate that they have where they don't need as much sunlight. It's real simple. It's like he said, natural selection, but it goes back to eugenics insofar as the force that eugenics is measuring is part of that. It's the main driver.
Well, there's another issue involved as well, which is why
Closing statements. Closing statements.
I know. I just have to. I'm answering his question. The out of Africa thing, which is becoming less believed, but is still pervasive. The reason why it pervades is because when you look at the three main racial groups, you got the Negroids, Caucasoids, and Mongoloids, right? When you look at those groups, what we see is the Caucasoids, which is myself. We have the Homo erectus black gene in us, of course, but we also have a large percentage, Jesus, a large percentage
You
of
got a Homo
Neanderthal,
erectus.
and there is a third early hominid that is in our DNA, which we've yet to find and therefore has not been classified. If you go to the Asians, the Mongoloids, they have that we know exactly what their makeup is. They're made of Homo erectus, Neanderthal, and Decinovan. Right, and the interesting aspect of this is the Africans, the Negroid populations, they have none of that. Whereas the Asians and the whites both have Neanderthal DNA in them, with the Caucasians having upwards of 7 to 12% in them, but the Africans have none at all. So when we come into the conversation of how did that all take place, it makes you think, well, they came out of Africa, they found other human populations, interacted with them, and poof, you get the Caucasoids and Mongoloids. But it's maybe a little more
Mixed
complicated.
biology books from the 16th century. I think he's got a problem with just saying.
All right, fine. But anyway,
Closing statements.
But I think natural selection is the easiest answer. Me, Grimlife King, go ahead, dude. You're muted, by the way.
He's out of here.
You are
Oh
muted.
no, I'm right here. What was you gonna say?
No, closing statement, please.
I just came in because it was a very interesting topic, a nuanced topic, a topic I would like to see people who are more racist be intellectually honest about when they have a conversation about. Yeah. So
Awesome.
I'm just glad to be able to join in.
That's cool, dude. You're always welcome, just as everyone else is always welcome. That's what we do here. And I think it's fun to hear other voices. So thank you very much for coming in, dude. All right.
Appreciate it.
Model.
You are being conditioned to give up your ability to critical think. Anything in life that has value takes effort, and that includes information and your education. So work on it. Don't just accept the crap that's fed to you.
Ooh, namaste.
Namaste.
Saved you for last. Lundero, go ahead, dude.
Okay, closing statement's real simple. I actually think, like Chester said, this was a great conversation. It was a really good show. I think there's a lot more into it, but what I would like to get into, if we ever do another show on this, which we probably will, to get a little bit more deeper into such things or similar topics, solutions. I think people need to think about that, because what does solutions look like? We talked about how abortion is a bad solution for it. In my opinion, maybe it's not in everybody's, but in mine it is. So what are some solutions? We could get into that at another time, but the long and the short of it is the measure of human development and growth is what eugenics is. It is a good thing. It can be used, like all good things, for evil, but for the most part, it is a good thing. If you take nothing else away from this, take that away. You've been told that it's not. You're not supposed to talk about it because immediately it evokes Hitler and the Nazis. That is what Hitler and the Nazis did. They took things like the swastika and corrupted them to their own purposes. That is what evil does. It takes good and turns it into bad. Don't let them. The only reason that the swastika in the West is considered evil is because of Hitler, and it really shouldn't be, because it's silly that it still is. That being said, eugenics is the same way. Eugenics is a tool. It can be used for good or for evil. Humanity, our history, is not our destiny. We can become more than we were. We've done it since the dawn of time. As long as we allow people with power and influence to dictate to us what we're allowed to know, we will never break the cycle of history that we're very close to repeating again, where we get to these precipices where we have this great knowledge and we fall off. We don't have to do that, but the way we have to break it is by talking about things that the society tells us we're not allowed to talk about.
Revolution.
You need to be careful with your words,
It's
buddy.
gonna have to be a boogaloo. It's the only way.
Boogaloo. Yeah.
Referring to eugenics as a solution had me a bit. Ooh.
It can be. it can be a useful tool,
Perhaps
just
even
like
a
all others.
final one, you think?
Maybe a final solution. But
Right.
okay. Now, usually I have other people.
Disavow you all.
You disavow us all. All right, guys. Usually I have someone else do a namaste moment, but I'm going to take it today for the very first time. I'm going to do the namaste today. And my namaste is short and sweet. A mind is a terrible thing to waste. You're supposed to say namaste, Booster, you bastard.
Namaste. Yeah.
Right. Fine. All right, guys.
You don't have him trained as well as Dinale.
I know, right? In Dinale's awkward timing. Namaste. Yeah. Anyway, here we go, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Keep in mind that tomorrow's our California show, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll come back with the standard comics news today. This week will be very normal. We'll do all our normal things. Come back for Bugbear's Basement, in which we're having a lot of fun with that campaign. And, of course, all the other things we do this week as usual. So thank you all. We appreciate it. This was a great conversation today. Hope you keep coming back. And tell your friends and family about it so they can come and join us.
We're big racists.
Even though we're horrible racists, yes, of course. But thank you all very much, and I will see you tomorrow. So later.
Bye.